Imagine being chained, helpless, with no one to trust, and then a stranger appears, calm, deliberate, and ready to free you. Today's story is about courage, trust, and survival in the Wild West. Don't blink, because every moment will keep you on the edge of your seat. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, share this video, and leave a comment. Let's get started and see how this Apache woman finds freedom in the most unexpected way. The desert wind cut across the canyon like a sharpened blade, carrying dust, heat, and the faint scent of sagebrush. A young Apache woman was chained to a weathered wooden fence, the rope digging cruelly into her wrists. Her dark hair was matted with dirt and sweat, her clothing torn, and her eyes flashed defiance even as her body trembled with exhaustion. She glared at the lone figure approaching from the horizon, a cowboy whose slow, deliberate pace suggested patience rather than recklessness. "Do whatever you want," she spat, her voice trembling but fierce, warning him not to underestimate her. The cowboy paused several feet away, his silhouette outlined against the dying light of the afternoon sun. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he crouched slightly, his boots crunching over the dry, cracked earth, and examined the ropes binding her. His hands moved carefully, inspecting the knots and frayed fibers with precision. There was no rush, no careless heroism. Every motion was deliberate, almost reverent, as if he understood that freedom could not be taken by force, but had to be offered and accepted. She watched him warily, unsure whether his intentions were kind or yet another trap. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice low but guarded. "You don't even know me, you don't owe me anything." The cowboy looked up, his eyes calm, steady, revealing nothing yet hinting at a quiet confidence. "No one owes anyone anything," he said softly, "but sometimes the right thing is the only thing you can do." The words were simple, almost mundane, yet they carried weight in the barren, lawless land. Slowly, he began loosening the ropes around her wrists, giving her small victories of movement and control. Inch by inch, the tension in her body eased. Her eyes never left his hands as he worked. She had been betrayed too many times, left to the mercy of cruel men who used words like promise and honor, but delivered only pain. The cowboy's silence was different, it held honesty. Each knot undone was a testament to his patience, a lesson that freedom could be granted without fear or force. She tested him cautiously, shifting her weight slightly to see if he would react aggressively, but he did not. He continued his slow, deliberate work, and with every fraction of movement, her heart began to recognize a strange, cautious hope. Finally, the last knot was undone. She flexed her wrists, feeling the blood return to her fingers, feeling the first real sense of agency in weeks. The cowboy extended a hand, a simple gesture that carried immense trust. She hesitated, her instincts screaming to flee, to vanish into the rocky wilderness that had been her only sanctuary. Yet the hand remained steady, patient, waiting for her decision without coercion. She took a measured breath, and with a flicker of courage, placed her hand in his. It was a small, tentative step toward safety, toward partnership in survival, and toward a fragile truce between two souls shaped by different worlds. Together, they moved away from the fence, leaving the chains and the fear behind. The canyon stretched endlessly before them, a labyrinth of rock and shadow, and the cowboy led without words, choosing paths that offered safety and resources. He found a small, clear stream where they could drink, and he gathered dry branches for fire. The Apache woman observed quietly, noting the deliberate care in his actions. It was survival, not spectacle. He built a small fire, the flames flickering against the darkening canyon walls, offering warmth and a faint sense of security she hadn't felt in a long time. Night fell and the canyon became alive with sounds, the rustle of small animals, the distant cry of a coyote, the wind threading through narrow cliffs. The Apache woman sat beside the fire, warmth touching her chilled bones. For a long time neither spoke. Then she asked, hesitant but curious, "Why did you help me? You didn't have to." He shrugged lightly, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Because it was right," he said simply. There was no pride in his tone, no expectation of gratitude. Just a quiet, unshakable sense of moral clarity, a quality she had almost forgotten existed in the men who roamed these lands. Days passed. The canyon became a fragile sanctuary where trust grew slowly, like the first shoots of grass in spring. They hunted together, foraged for roots and berries, and learned to read the terrain, each step strengthening their understanding of one another. The Apache woman shared pieces of her life cautiously, stories of her tribe, of families lost, of traditions that survived through the wilderness. The cowboy listened. He offered no judgment, no unsolicited advice, only presence and respect. Through these shared experiences, a bond formed that was neither romantic nor transactional. It was built on trust, mutual respect, and the silent understanding that they were stronger together than apart. One afternoon, while tracking a deer through a narrow canyon, the woman slipped and nearly fell into a hidden ravine. The cowboy's hand shot out instinctively, catching her just in time. Her heart pounded, and she realized then how deeply she had come to rely on him, not as a savior, not as a master, but as a companion who moved through the wilderness with her, understanding its dangers and possibilities alike. His presence had become a shield and a guide, a reminder that not all men sought power over her, that some acted with integrity even when the world seemed devoid of it. As night approached on the third day, the sky ignited with colors, crimson, gold, and deep violet, reflecting off the canyon walls. They sat by the fire once again, and she began to speak more freely, recounting memories of her childhood, her family, the loss she had endured. He listened, offering nods and the occasional word of acknowledgement. There was no interruption, no attempt to redirect her story. She realized that he was teaching her something vital, that being heard, being acknowledged, and being treated with respect could be as life-saving as water or food in the desert. The wilderness, though harsh and unforgiving, began to feel less hostile. The Apache woman learned to move with confidence, following the cowboy's example of patience and observation. Every rustle in the brush, every echo through the canyon, became part of a rhythm she could understand and anticipate. Fear was no longer a constant companion, it had become a tool. Something to be acknowledged and respected, but not allowed to dominate her choices. In the presence of someone who acted with deliberate care, she rediscovered a sense of control and a small but growing hope for survival. By the fourth day, their movements through the canyon had become a coordinated dance. They scouted high cliffs for vantage points, foraged for edible plants, and set small snares for rabbits. Each task, though simple, required trust. She had come to recognize that this man's actions were never about dominance or control. He moved through the world with clarity and intention, and by following him, she learned not just to survive, but to thrive in a land that had once seemed merciless. Her respect for him grew, as did the fragile bond between them, grounded not in words, but in shared experiences and mutual reliance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the canyon's edge, painting the sky with streaks of fire, she realized something profound. Freedom was more than being unchained. It was the ability to trust, to act with courage, and to step into the unknown without being paralyzed by fear. The cowboy had not only freed her body from ropes, but had also shown her the first steps toward freeing her spirit. She sat quietly by the fire, watching the flickering flames, and understood that this journey was about more than escaping captivity. It was about reclaiming her sense of self, her agency, and her belief in the possibility of goodness in a cruel world. Next morning, the canyon was bathed in a pale golden light. Dew sparkled on jagged rocks, and the wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth. The Apache woman awoke to find the cowboy already stirring a small fire, the embers casting soft shadows across the rugged landscape. He had found a safe spot for the night, far from the main canyon trail. She stretched her stiff limbs, her body sore but her spirit stronger. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of safety that wasn't fleeting. The ropes, the fear, and the chains were all behind her now. As they packed up camp, the woman moved with a newfound confidence. She helped gather the remaining firewood and clean the small stream they had relied on. The cowboy watched silently, his eyes scanning the canyon for potential threats, ever vigilant yet calm. She marveled at his ability to move so deliberately, each gesture purposeful, yet so natural. This quiet strength was unlike anything she had seen in men before. There was no desire to dominate, no arrogance, only action grounded in respect for the world around him. She began to understand that this was freedom not just from chains, but from fear. Their journey through the canyon continued, and the landscape changed as they moved deeper. Jagged cliffs gave way to narrow trails lined with wildflowers, streams widened slightly, and the distant mountains appeared like silent guardians. The cowboy navigated the terrain with a practiced ease, teaching her silently to read signs in the rocks, animal tracks, and subtle shifts in the wind. She absorbed every lesson, feeling a sense of empowerment she had thought impossible. The chains that had once bound her wrists had been replaced by knowledge and experience, and with each step, her trust in him grew deeper. One afternoon, as they crossed a rocky ridge, a sudden movement caught their attention. Shadows shifted, and the unmistakable sound of hooves echoed through the canyon. A band of outlaws, rugged and armed, appeared from behind a bend. Their laughter was harsh, their eyes greedy and cruel. The Apache woman's heart raced, old instincts of flight screaming in her ears, but the cowboy remained composed. He crouched slightly behind a rock and gestured for her to do the same. "Stay calm. Move only when I tell you," he whispered. His voice carried authority, but not fear, and for the first time, she followed his lead without question. The outlaws drew closer, boasting loudly of their planned robbery. The cowboy's eyes flicked across the canyon, calculating. When the moment came, he struck with precision. Using the natural cover of rocks, he fired carefully, hitting his targets without waste. The woman watched in awe as he moved like a shadow, every step purposeful, every shot deliberate. The outlaws panicked, scattering into the canyon, leaving behind their weapons and their arrogance. For the first time, she realized the full extent of his skill and the courage behind his calm demeanor. It was a quiet heroism, not for fame or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. After the danger passed, silence returned to the canyon. The Apache woman exhaled deeply, the adrenaline slowly fading. She looked at the cowboy, seeing him not just as a protector, but as someone who had earned her respect through action, patience, and integrity. For a moment, words seemed unnecessary. The bond between them was spoken in gestures, glances, and shared survival. That night by the fire, she spoke more freely than ever before, recounting memories of her childhood, the traditions of her people, and the hardships she had endured. He listened intently, never interrupting, simply offering acknowledgement. As days turned into a week, they settled into a rhythm. The canyon became a sanctuary where she learned the art of patience, observation, and strategic movement. They foraged for food, hunted small game, and discovered hidden paths that offered safety and shelter. Every task required cooperation, and with every shared success, the bond between them strengthened. She realized that true strength lay not in force, but in understanding, and that freedom was as much about mastering oneself as escaping captivity. She began to feel a sense of empowerment, a reclaiming of her spirit she hadn't thought possible. One morning, as the sun rose over the canyon's edge, the Apache woman noticed a change in herself. Fear still lingered, but it was no longer a chain around her spirit. She moved with confidence, scanning the terrain, anticipating dangers, and appreciating the subtle beauty of the wilderness. The cowboy, always calm and steady, had become a teacher without words, showing her that trust and patience could yield strength far beyond what brute force could achieve. She looked at him, gratitude welling up in her chest, and realized that this journey had transformed her in ways she could never have imagined. Their final test came unexpectedly. A sudden flash of movement in the canyon drew their attention. A mountain lion, large and menacing, prowled near their path. The Apache woman froze, but the cowboy acted without hesitation. He assessed the animal's behavior, gauged the distance, and instructed her quietly to stay behind a boulder. Using skill and caution, he guided the lion away without harm, demonstrating that courage was not recklessness, but wisdom combined with decisive action. She watched, her respect for him deepening further. She understood now that survival required more than strength. It required intelligence, patience, and moral clarity. By the time they emerged from the canyon, the Apache woman had fully reclaimed her freedom. The chains were long gone, replaced with knowledge, experience, and the confidence to navigate the world on her own terms. The cowboy stood beside her, silent but unwavering, a constant reminder that trust and integrity could still exist in a harsh and unforgiving world. She smiled faintly, realizing that freedom was no longer just about escaping captivity. It was about embracing life with courage, wisdom, and hope. As they parted ways near the canyon's edge, the Apache woman turned to the cowboy. "Thank you," she said simply. No grand gestures, no elaborate words, just honesty. He nodded, a small smile crossing his face, and tipped his hat, Take care of yourself, he said, and remember freedom isn't given, it's earned every day. She watched him ride away, the dust rising behind him, feeling a sense of completion and inner strength she had never known before. The journey through fear, trust, and survival had transformed her entirely, and she carried with her the lessons of patience, courage, and the quiet power of doing what is right. The sun sank low over the canyon, painting the rocks with hues of gold and crimson. The Apache woman stood tall, her body free, her mind clear, and her heart unburdened. She had survived chains, fear, and doubt, and in doing so had discovered a new strength within herself. The cowboy's presence, his patient actions, and his unwavering integrity had shown her that true freedom came not just from escaping captivity, but from embracing courage, wisdom, and trust. And in that quiet, sunlit moment, she understood that her life, her choices, and her spirit were hers alone, unshackled and unafraid.